Sir, economy gates are at 12B. Rebecca Thornton didn't look up, just gestured toward the main terminal, dismissing Haley Carter like an inconvenience. Haley held up his phone. Platinum Elite, seat 2A. I'm checking in for first class. Rebecca's eyes lifted, traveled from his face to his clothes. Suspicion replaced courtesy. She took the phone, studied it. This area is for premium passengers. Are you sure this ticket is yours? I'm sure. Platinum Elite for 7 years. Behind him, passengers noticed. Marcus, a black man by the window, looked up, his expression resignation. He'd seen this before. Rebecca grabbed her radio. Need verification, possible fraud, suspicious passenger, African-American male. Not a name, just a category. Haley felt cold anger, but showed nothing. I'm not suspicious. I'm a passenger with a confirmed ticket. We'll see. Rebecca's smile was victorious. Murmurs started. Why would he try? This isn't for people like him. Heads shook in judgment. Marcus pulled out his phone, recording. Haley stood still. In his briefcase, a $124 billion contract signed that morning with this airline. In his pocket, numbers most people here didn't know existed. Quiet power waiting for the right moment. One phone call, 10 minutes. Everything would flip, but not yet. Not until they revealed who they were. Haley moved toward the check-in counter with the unhurried gait of someone who'd learned that rushing only invited more questions. The lounge hummed with the soft clatter of silverware against porcelain, low conversations conducted in the language of expense accounts and connecting flights. A woman behind the counter, Rebecca Thornton, her name tag read, was mid-laugh with 2 men in tailored suits, her voice warm and easy in a way that suggested familiarity, maybe even friendship. He waited. 3 minutes passed. Rebecca's eyes had flickered over him once when he'd entered, a glance so brief it might have been an accident, before returning to her conversation about ski resorts in Aspen. The 2 men collected their drinks and moved toward the buffet. Still, she didn't turn. Excuse me, Haley said, his voice level. I need to check in for flight SL847, first class. Rebecca's smile thinned as she looked at him, her gaze traveling from his face to his clothes, to the carry-on at his side. It was the kind of look that measured and found wanting. First class check-in? Her tone carried a note of something, not quite disbelief, but its quieter cousin. The economy gates are at 12B, down that way. She gestured vaguely toward the main terminal. Haley pulled out his phone, turned the screen toward her. The boarding pass glowed. Platinum Elite status, seat 2A, his name in bold letters. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied it, her jaw tightening in a way that suggested the muscles there knew this exercise well. She took the phone, held it closer than necessary as if proximity might reveal some hidden flaw. This area is reserved for our premium passengers, she said slowly, handing the phone back without meeting his eyes. Are you sure this ticket is yours? The question hung between them like smoke. Behind Haley, a man in an expensive watch collected champagne from the bar without being asked for identification, without being asked for anything at all. Marcus, a black passenger seated near the window with a laptop open, looked up from his screen. His expression shifted. Recognition, then resignation. He'd seen this movie before. He knew how it ended. Haley felt the familiar weight settling in his chest. That old companion he'd carried since he was a boy, being followed in department stores, since he was a teenager pulled over for driving in the wrong neighborhood, since he was a young engineer being asked if he was sure he belonged in the room where decisions were made. The weight had a name, though no one liked to say it out loud. It whispered, "You don't look like you belong here." "I'm sure," Haley said quietly. His voice carried no heat, no edge, just certainty. "I've been Platinum Elite for 7 years. You can check the system." Rebecca's fingers moved across her keyboard with deliberate slowness, her lips pressed into a thin line. The screen reflected in her eyes as she scrolled, and for just a fraction of a second, so brief Haley almost missed it, something shifted in her expression. Then she blinked, and it was gone. "The system is running slow," she said, her voice flat. "You'll need to wait." The waiting stretched like a wire pulled tight. Rebecca's hands had stopped moving on the keyboard, though her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Around them, the lounge continued. Glasses refilled, newspapers rustled, soft announcements chimed. But here, time had thickened. "I need additional verification," Rebecca said, not looking up. "ID, credit card, and email confirmation." Haley pulled out his wallet. His driver's license and credit card slid across the counter. Rebecca picked up the license, held it toward the overhead light, tilting it back and forth as if searching for watermarks on a counterfeit bill. Her examination was slow, theatrical. At the bar, a passenger in an expensive watch ordered his second champagne. No one had asked him for verification. No one had asked him anything. "How did you purchase this ticket?" Rebecca asked. "Who paid for it?" "I did, through my corporate account, Carter Dynamics." She set the license down, reached for the radio on her belt, turned slightly away but not far enough. Haley heard every word. "Need a verification. Possible fraud situation. Platinum Elite, but suspicious passenger. African-American male." The clinical phrase hung in the air like an indictment. Not a name, not a person. Just a category, a checkbox that reduced him to skin color and presumed guilt. Across the lounge, Marcus had stopped typing. His eyes met Haley's, silent communion between two men who understood this wasn't about a ticket or a slow system. This was about something older, something that lived in the spaces between words, in the tone of voices, in the way someone held your ID to the light. The anger settled cold in Haley's stomach. He'd built systems that kept people safe at 30,000 feet, sat across from generals and CEOs, signed contracts with numbers most couldn't imagine. And still, in this moment, he was a suspect in a crime he hadn't committed. But he knew better than to show it. Anger from a black man wasn't righteous. It was dangerous. It confirmed biases, justified escalation. "I'm happy to wait for verification," Haley said quietly. "But you didn't require this from other passengers." Rebecca's jaw tightened. She looked at him directly for the first time, her eyes carrying not malice but something worse. Certainty. The unshakable belief that she was right to question him. "Company policy. We have to be thorough." Selective thoroughness, Haley thought. The kind that only applied to certain people. Rebecca shifted, positioning herself between him and the buffet where others moved freely. A small gesture, barely noticeable, its message clear. "You're not welcome here." His phone buzzed. He typed a message to his assistant. "Document everything. Timeline, witnesses, legal needs, full report." Rebecca watched him, new suspicion blooming. "No filming allowed in this area." "I wasn't filming." "I was sending an email." But it didn't matter. In her mind, the categorization was complete. He was filed under potential threat, whatever euphemism they used for people who looked like him and dared to occupy spaces like this. The presumption of guilt had been made. Now she was just looking for evidence to confirm it. The lounge's ambient noise seemed to recede, the soft jazz from hidden speakers, the murmur of privileged conversation, the clink of crystal. What remained was the sound of suspicion, of bureaucratic process weaponized into discrimination. Haley had been through this before, in different forms, different places. The department store security guard, the police officer at the traffic stop, the colleague who asked if he was sure he was in the right conference room. Each time, the same script, the same presumption that his presence required explanation, that his belonging needed proof beyond what was asked of others. He thought of his father, who'd worked 3 jobs to send him to MIT, who'd told him that education and achievement would be armor against this kind of treatment. His father had been wrong, But not in the way that mattered. The armor wasn't in what you accomplished. It was in how you carried yourself when people tried to strip it away. The man who appeared wore authority like a second skin. Bradley Winters, Director of Customer Services, his badge announced. Mid-50s, gray suit pressed sharp, a face practiced in smiling without warmth. He didn't extend his hand. Just a curt nod, eyes already cataloging, already judging. I understand there's an issue with your ticket. Not a question. A statement that placed blame before facts. No issue, Haley said evenly. I'm checking in. Bradley's gaze traveled the same route Rebecca's had. Face, clothes, luggage, but slower, more deliberate. Ms. Thornton is following protocol. I'm sure you understand we have to be careful. The word careful landed heavy, spreading implications like ripples. Let's step over here, so we don't disturb the other guests. Bradley gestured toward the windows, away from the main seating. Not other passengers, other guests. The linguistic choice was precise, deliberate. It drew a line, placed Haley on one side and everyone else on the other. They moved to the designated spot, still visible, a theater of humiliation in afternoon light. A woman in pearls glanced over, then away. A businessman paused mid-sip, watching. Bradley folded his arms. What do you do for a living, Mr. Carter? The question landed like a slap disguised as conversation. When had Bradley asked the man with the watch about his profession? When had he demanded a financial biography from anyone else? I'm an engineer. Bradley's smile didn't reach his eyes. An engineer. That's good. And you can afford first class? On an engineer's salary? There it was. The presumption laid bare. Black plus first class. Suspicious. As if achievement and skin color couldn't coexist. People like you usually fly economy, Bradley continued, his voice dropping to confidential. Nothing wrong with that. More economical. People like you. The phrase hung thick with implication. Haley felt his jaw tighten, felt old rage trying to surface, the rage of being told he didn't belong, of being pulled over for matching a description, of building empires on intelligence yet still being asked to justify his existence to mediocre men in cheap suits. But rage was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not here. Rage would give them what they wanted, confirmation of their fears. So he breathed through it, felt it settle into something colder, more patient. I can provide any documentation you need. Good. Very cooperative. Bradley checked his phone. Because if you can't produce satisfactory proof in 5 minutes, I'll call airport security. We've had issues with fraudulent tickets, identity theft. You understand? Identity theft. The irony cut deep. His identity was being stolen right now, reduced to stereotype, threat, problem. The man he actually was, CEO of a defense contractor, architect of systems powering Bradley's fleet, holder of security clearances that would make heads spin. None of that existed here. He'd been erased, replaced with a cardboard cutout labeled suspicious. The lounge had developed an audience. Conversations quieted. Eyes flicked toward them and away. A woman pulled her handbag closer. A man whispered to his companion, heads bent in judgment. Marcus had turned in his seat, phone angled toward the scene, his face carrying weary familiarity. Someone who'd seen this movie too many times but couldn't stop hoping that maybe this time the ending would be different. Haley reached for his phone, not to show more documents, not to prove anything to Bradley Winters or Rebecca Thornton. He pulled up a number from his contacts, a number accessible only to board members and executives, a number most people in this building didn't know existed. I need to make a call. Bradley stepped closer, voice barely controlled. Sir, I've told you. But Haley was already dialing. 3 rings. A voice answered. This is Haley Carter, CEO of Carter Dynamics. I need David Kowalski immediately. I'm at Houston International Platinum Lounge. I need to discuss the Navtech SL-225 contract we signed this morning, specifically the ethics violation clause. Bradley's posture shifted, aggression melting into uncertainty. Rebecca had gone still. The name NavTech hung in the air. Around them, passengers pulled out phones, not for boarding passes, but to search, to Google, to verify what their instincts whispered. Yes, the $124 billion contract. The one with immediate termination for ethical breaches. The number dropped into silence like a grenade. Bradley's face paled. Rebecca's hand rose to her mouth. In the window's reflection, Haley could see Marcus leaning forward, phone steady, recording everything. Because sometimes, the only way to fight a rigged system wasn't to play by its rules. Sometimes you had to show them exactly who they'd underestimated. Sometimes you had to make them understand that the man they'd treated like a criminal held their fate in his hands. And sometimes, justice was just one phone call away. The phone was still at Haley's ear when Bradley moved. Not quickly, but with deliberate authority. His hand reached toward Haley's wrist, not touching but close enough to signal intent. "Sir, end that call. Company policy prohibits unauthorized phone use in premium areas." Haley didn't lower the phone. "This is authorized. I'm calling the CEO of your company." "You don't have permission to—" "I'm a Platinum Elite member with a confirmed ticket. I have every right." Haley's voice remained level, but something in it had changed. The patience was still there, but it had developed an edge, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Bradley's jaw clenched. Around them, the ambient noise had shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Silverware ceased clinking. Even the background music seemed to lower, as if the room was holding its breath. A semicircle of passengers formed at careful distance, close enough to watch, far enough to maintain deniability. "You're creating a disturbance. If you don't comply, I'll call security." Marcus stood from his seat, phone held at chest level, camera pointed at Bradley. "I'm recording this. 3,000 people are watching this live stream right now." Bradley's head snapped toward Marcus, his expression cycling through surprise, anger, something like fear. "You can't. That's not allowed. Public space, First Amendment, 4,000 viewers now." The number hit Bradley like cold water. His face flushed, red creeping up from his collar. He recovered quickly, reaching for the radio at his belt. "Rebecca, call security. Uncooperative passenger. Safety risk. Safety risk." The phrase that had justified 1,000 injustices, that transformed ordinary people into threats simply because someone in authority decided they didn't belong. Haley felt the familiar calculus, the mathematics of survival that black men learned early. How do you prove you're not dangerous when the presumption is already fixed? 2 security guards appeared from staff only. Large men, hands resting near their belts, near the equipment hanging there. They moved toward Haley with synchronized precision. "This passenger is refusing to comply," Bradley announced, voice loud enough for the growing audience. "He's being aggressive and uncooperative." Aggressive. Another word with weight, with history. Haley hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved toward anyone. But in the translation that mattered, in Bradley's mind, in the guard's assessment, in the silent judgment of watching passengers, he'd become aggressive simply by refusing to accept his assigned role. The lounge had transformed into an arena, with Haley at its center. Phones emerged from pockets like fireflies at dusk, screens glowing, cameras recording. This wasn't just happening. It was being documented, ready for broadcast. An older woman in cream pantsuit pushed through the crowd. "Excuse me? Why are you checking his ticket when you didn't check mine? Or his?" She pointed at a man who'd checked in earlier without showing anything except his phone. "I've been watching. This is discriminatory." Bradley's professional smile snapped back like a mask. "Ma'am, this is routine security procedure." "Exactly. So what makes him different?" The question hung unanswered because the answer was too obvious, too damning to say aloud. Bradley's smile tightened. 7,000 viewers now, Marcus announced. The hashtag Skylinks racism is trending. The word, racism, detonated like a small bomb. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, others pulled out phones, typing rapidly, taking sides. Within minutes, the story escaped its physical boundaries, spilling onto social media, where it would be dissected, debated, weaponized, shared millions of times. But not everyone was sympathetic. A man near the bar muttered about playing the race card, loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough for deniability. A woman whispered to her companion, eyes on Haley with unshakable suspicion. For every person outraged on his behalf, another was certain he must have done something to deserve this. A younger employee emerged from behind the counter. Jessica, her name tag read. Her face carried the expression of someone witnessing injustice, but unsure whether speaking up would cost her more than staying silent. "He hasn't done anything wrong," she said quietly, almost to herself. But not quite quietly enough. Rebecca turned sharply. "Get back to work." "But he's just... Now, Jessica." The younger woman retreated, but not before catching Haley's eye. In that brief connection, he saw recognition, acknowledgement that what was happening was wrong, even if she lacked the power or courage to stop it. That recognition was its own validation. Bradley's hand was on his radio, voice tight. "I need TSA at the Platinum Lounge. Situation requires immediate escalation. Possible fraudulent documents, passenger refusing cooperation. Request police backup." "Police backup." The words rippled through the crowd. This had escalated from inconvenience to interrogation to potential arrest. The security guards moved closer, body language shifting from observant to ready. One had his hand on his hip, fingers drumming near his belt. The threat was unmistakable. Haley felt the moment crystallizing. He thought of his father, who'd taught him dignity was something no one could take unless you gave it away. He thought of the contracts in his briefcase, the systems he'd built, the lives his work had saved. He thought of young engineers in his company who looked like him, watching, whether they knew it or not, to see if the world had room for them. He lowered his phone, not in surrender, in preparation. "David," he said, his voice carrying across the lounge with perfect clarity. "Haley Carter, I'm at your Houston Platinum Lounge being detained by your Director of Customer Services because apparently I don't look like someone who belongs in first class. I need you to confirm something. The Navtech SL 2025 contract we signed this morning, the one worth $124 billion for aircraft systems upgrades, that contract has an ethics clause, doesn't it? Immediate termination for discriminatory practices by either party." The silence that followed was absolute. Bradley's face went from flushed to pale as understanding dawned. Rebecca pressed both hands against the counter as if the surface was the only thing keeping her upright. The security guards froze mid-step, suddenly uncertain. Navtech. The name echoed in the minds of anyone who worked for Skylinks, the company that had just signed the biggest technology contract in the airline's history. The company they couldn't afford to lose. Phones that had been recording were now being used to search. Passengers typed frantically, "Haley Carter, Carter Dynamics, Navtech contract." Results came back in waves. Forbes articles, defense industry news, photographs of Haley with senators and generals, MIT degrees, avionics patents, innovation awards. The cognitive dissonance was visible, the collision between what they'd assumed and who he actually was. "Oh, God," Rebecca whispered, hand covering her mouth, eyes wide with dawning horror. She'd seen something in the system earlier. Now she understood what. 12,000 viewers, Marcus said. Recording shared 40,000 times in 5 minutes. Black traveling while black is trending nationwide. Bradley opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Carter, there's been a misunderstanding." "No," Haley said quietly. "There's been a perfect understanding. This is exactly what you meant to happen. You saw a black man in first class and decided he needed to prove he belonged. You subjected me to questions you wouldn't ask anyone else, called me suspicious, aggressive, a safety risk. Ready to have me arrested for expecting basic dignity. The only misunderstanding is yours. You didn't understand who you were dealing with. The security guard stepped back. Earlier certainty evaporated. Jessica was crying quietly behind the counter. Some passengers were still recording, faces changed. Some triumphant, some ashamed, some still processing. A younger passenger started a slow clap. It was joined by another, then another, until nearly half the lounge was applauding. Not everyone. Some gathered belongings to leave, some typed furiously, crafting narratives to preserve their worldview. But enough people clapped that the sound filled the space, transformed it into something other than what Bradley Winters had intended. Haley looked at Bradley, at Rebecca, at the security guards. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of every indignity he'd ever endured. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't activate the termination clause in that contract. Why I shouldn't pull $1.24 billion from an airline that employs people who treat passengers like criminals based on skin color. 60 seconds to convince me Skylinks Airlines deserves a second chance. Bradley's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His authority, so solid minutes ago, had dissolved like sugar in water. He looked to Rebecca for support, but she was staring at her hands, face frozen in the expression of someone watching their career end. The security guards had retreated, trying to fade into background. The countdown had begun, and in the silence that followed, everyone understood they were witnessing something beyond a customer service dispute. They were watching the moment when real power, the kind that moved mountains and ended careers, revealed itself. And they were learning that sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who holds your entire world in his hands. The overhead speakers crackled. Attention all Skylinks personnel at Houston International. This is David Kowalski, Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Haley Carter, CEO of Carter Dynamics and Skylink's strategic partner, is currently in the Platinum Lounge. Any complaints raised by Mr. Carter are highest priority. All involved personnel remain on site pending immediate investigation. The silence that followed was deafening. Bradley Winters looked like a man watching his house burn. Color drained from his face, leaving gray pallor. Rebecca pressed both hands against the counter, breathing shallow, eyes fixed on nothing. From the staff corridor, rapid footsteps. A woman emerged, black, mid-40s, executive blazer, followed by 3 people in suits. She moved with purpose but also pain. Mr. Carter, I'm Sarah Mitchell, Vice President of Partner Relations. On behalf of Skylinks, I offer immediate apology. Haley raised his hand, commanding silence. I don't need an apology to me. Is this the first time your employees have treated a black passenger this way? Sarah's silence was answer enough. Her jaw tightened. She knew. Of course she knew. He pulled out an iPad, turned it outward. This is Navtech SL 2025, signed this morning. Aircraft Systems Integration for 340 aircraft, $1.24 billion. Section 17, Subsection C, Immediate Termination for Discriminatory Practices under Title VII. You have 60 seconds. Explain why I shouldn't terminate this contract, starting now. Bradley's mouth opened and closed. Words tried to form, but died before becoming coherent. 45 seconds. Bradley's knees buckled. He sank until he was kneeling on the carpet, hands together in supplication. Please, I didn't know. I have 3 kids. Please. Rebecca started crying. I have 2 children. I can't lose this job. Haley looked at them. What he felt was tired. This performance wasn't about understanding what they'd done wrong. It was about consequences. They weren't sorry they'd treated him with contempt. They were sorry he could hurt them back. 30 seconds. The crowd had swelled. Marcus's live stream had grown to 47,000 viewers. Sarah stepped forward. Mr. Carter, we will take immediate action. Both employees suspended. Mandatory training. Policy reviews, please. 12,000 employees depend on this airline. Time, Haley said. The word fell like a gavel. He thought about his father, who'd said power without purpose is just cruelty. He thought about young engineers watching this unfold. He thought about what actually created change. Punishment or the hard work of forcing a system to rebuild better? Marcus's phone steady, viewers at 50,000, the video going viral. I'm terminating the NavTech SL 2025 contract, effective immediately. Rebecca made a sound like she'd been struck. Bradley's head dropped. Sarah closed her eyes. However, Haley continued, and that word changed everything. I'm offering Skylinks the opportunity to re-earn that contract under new terms. Sarah's eyes opened. Hope flickered. Bradley Winters and Rebecca Thornton terminated, not suspended, no severance. Every employee undergoes anti-bias training, Carter Dynamics funded, AI-assisted monitoring of customer service, passenger bill of rights with real enforcement, $5 million to scholarships for students of color in aviation, 30 days to implement, then contract reinstates with quarterly reviews for 2 years. One violation, contract terminates permanently, no second chances. The terms fell like hammer strikes. Sarah nodded, tears tracking down her cheeks. Haley looked around. This isn't about revenge. This is about accountability, about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to the next person, about building a system that sees people, all people, as worthy of dignity, not because of accomplishments or money, but because they're human beings. And that should be enough. The applause started slowly, then built. Not everyone joined, some too uncomfortable, but enough that the sound transformed the space. Sarah stepped forward, extended her hand. We'll do it. All of it. Haley nodded. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for every person who'll walk through this lounge after me. As he turned to leave, the crowd parted. Marcus followed, phone recording. At the door, Haley paused and looked back. The lounge had been transformed, from sanctuary of privilege into battlefield and classroom. A place where comfortable assumptions had been challenged, where power structures became visible, where the cost of discrimination had been calculated in dollars and dignity both. He'd walked in as a traveler. He was leaving as a reminder that the most dangerous power is the kind people don't know you have until you choose to reveal it. In that moment, Haley wasn't just a CEO making a business decision. He had become something larger, a symbol for everyone watching who'd ever been dismissed, underestimated, made to prove their worth. The applause wasn't just for him. It was for every person who'd bitten their tongue, who'd swallowed their pride, who'd walked away from injustice because they didn't have the leverage to fight back. This time, someone did. This time, the ending was different. And in lounges and living rooms and offices across the country, people watching Marcus's live stream felt something shift. The understanding that systems could be challenged, that power could be held accountable. That change was possible if you refused to accept that things had to stay the way they'd always been. 28 days later, the documentation arrived at Carter Dynamics. Haley reviewed the evidence of transformation from his Dallas office, skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. Every Skylinks employee had completed anti-bias certification. The failure rate was higher than expected. 12% of customer-facing staff couldn't pass even after retraining. They were gone, reassigned, or terminated. The AI monitoring system was live across 200 airports. The passenger bill of rights had been posted everywhere. The scholarship fund was established with 15 students of color already selected for aerospace and aviation programs. Bradley Winters and Rebecca Thornton had become case studies in the new training program. Their actions dissected in modules on implicit bias and discrimination costs. Their faces were pixelated, but everyone knew who they were. The airline industry was small and news traveled fast. Bradley had tried 3 other carriers. All declined after background checks revealed his termination circumstances. He'd ended up at a regional airline in the Midwest, significant step down. working operations, not customer service. The blacklist wasn't official, but his name had become synonymous with liability airlines couldn't afford. Rebecca had lost her flight attendant certification. The FAA hadn't revoked it, but Skylinks declined the recommendation required for recertification elsewhere. She'd filed wrongful termination, but the live stream footage, viewed millions of times, made her case unwinnable. Her lawyers advised settlement. She declined, insisted on trial, and lost. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. Both were required by civil court order to complete 6 months of unlearning bias, therapeutic intervention combining education with accountability. Whether it would change their hearts was unknowable, but they'd spend half a year confronting what they'd done in an environment where denial wasn't an option. The video had been viewed 8.9 million times. It had spawned Haley Carter Challenge, people sharing their own stories of discrimination and response. The hashtag had been used 200,000 times, creating an archive of experiences ranging from painful to infuriating to occasionally triumphant. Skylinks stock dropped 12% immediately, then recovered within 6 weeks as the airline's response became public. The market decided Skylinks was serious about reform. Sarah Mitchell had been promoted to senior vice president, becoming the public face of transformation, doing interviews and conferences about how one incident forced organizational reckoning. Haley had reinstated the Navtech contract on day 30. The first quarterly review was scheduled for next month. Early reports were cautiously optimistic. Complaints of discriminatory treatment had dropped significantly, whether because behavior changed or because monitoring made people more careful was unclear, but the outcome mattered. 47 airlines worldwide had adopted similar policies since the video went viral. The International Air Transport Association had issued new anti-discrimination guidelines. The incident had created ripples beyond Skylinks, forcing industry-wide conversation about who felt welcome at 30,000 feet. Marcus had been offered consulting work helping companies understand social media accountability. He'd declined, remaining independent, but he'd given talks about the power of bearing witness. A black engineering student at Howard University, recipient of a Skylinks scholarship, had emailed Haley last week. She'd almost given up on aerospace because she'd felt unwelcome. But watching what he'd done, seeing it was possible to challenge systems and win, had made her reconsider. She was staying in the program. She was going to finish her degree. That email mattered more than the contract renewal, more than policy changes, more than any of it. Because that was the point, not revenge, not punishment, but creation of space for people who came after. Justice wasn't about making Bradley and Rebecca suffer. It was about making sure their casual cruelty didn't define the industry, didn't go unchallenged. The system wasn't fixed. Systems never were, not permanently. But it had been forced to bend, to acknowledge failures, to build in accountability mechanisms. And that was something. That was progress. Small, imperfect, requiring constant vigilance, but real nonetheless. A week later, Haley stood at a podium in Chicago, addressing the Black Engineers Forum. Nearly 3,000 professionals filled the hall, most people of color who'd fought their own battles to be in rooms where decisions were made. I didn't come to talk about what I've built. I came to talk about Houston International and why it matters beyond one man's bad day. I didn't tell that story to celebrate my power. I told it because millions of people, black people, brown people, people who don't fit someone's narrow definition, go through versions of that experience every day, and most don't have a billion-dollar contract to protect themselves. The room leaned forward. Dignity doesn't come from your title or bank account. Dignity is what you're born with. It's non-negotiable. When someone tries to take it, when they decide you don't belong, make you prove what they'd never ask anyone else, refusing that theft is resistance, not because you're special, because injustice shouldn't be normal. He gripped the podium. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to change the system. Bradley Winters and Rebecca Thornton aren't the disease, they're symptoms. The disease is culture that looks at someone like me and sees a problem instead of a passenger. The disease is silence from people who see wrong and call it not their business. The disease is believing this is just how things are. Someone said amen quietly. Justice isn't watching bad people suffer. Justice is making sure the next person doesn't go through what you went through. It's building systems that see people, all people, as worthy of respect, not because of accomplishments, but because they're human. In a just world, that should be enough. The applause was affirming, recognition of shared experience. 47 airlines changed policies because one video went viral. One incident created ripples touching hundreds of millions. That's not about me. That's about refusing to accept that things can't change. He stepped back, posture relaxing. I'm not a hero. I'm someone who got tired of pretending dignity must be earned. I had leverage and chose to use it. But you all have leverage too. In workplaces, communities, in choices about what you'll accept. Use it, not for revenge, not ego, but for the person behind you who deserves better. The ovation lasted 2 minutes. But Haley was thinking about the Howard student, about emails from parents, about engineers who'd stopped accepting inevitable treatment. He was thinking about change, real, imperfect, but undeniable. Maybe the world was learning to be a little less cruel. If you're reading this story, you have a choice. Turn away. Tell yourself this doesn't concern you, that you lack power to make a difference. Decide silence is safer. Or be Marcus, the man who pulled out his phone when everyone looked away. Who pressed record when it would have been simpler to ignore it. Marcus didn't have $1 billion contract. He had a phone, a conscience, and courage. Because he acted, 47 airlines changed policies. Because he acted, hundreds of thousands shared their stories. Because he acted, an invisible system became visible. Power doesn't only live in boardrooms. It lives in choices when no one's watching. In speaking up when colleagues make racist jokes, calling out bias, supporting the person being questioned. Small moments accumulate into culture, into the difference between a world that punishes people for existing and one that makes space for everyone. Don't wait for power to use it. Every act of resistance matters. Every refusal cracks injustice's foundation. Enough cracks bring the structure down. Here's the twist. Haley was always powerful. The system didn't recognize it. You're powerful too. What will you do with it? Protect the status quo or challenge it? Be a bystander or witness? Choose comfort or courage? Next time you see someone treated like Haley, and you will, you'll decide. Look away or pull out your phone, stand up, speak truth. Sometimes justice is one phone call away. Sometimes accountability is one recording away. Sometimes change is one person saying, no, not here, not anymore. Systems change when people refuse to participate in injustice, when enough voices make silence impossible. Choose. Every day you choose what world you're building, whether to make it harder for the next Haley Carter or unnecessary for him to fight. Remember, respect isn't given by titles, it's demanded by dignity, and dignity, non-negotiable. Your humanity isn't debatable. You belong. You matter. Be Marcus. Document. Speak. Refuse to accept that cruelty is just business. The most dangerous power lives in ordinary people who decide ordinary injustice is no longer acceptable. Sometimes, just sometimes, that's the power that changes everything.